All right, thank you for coming today. We made a decision last night at 2 a.m. in the morning. I spoke to Marc Trestman and alerted him that he was going to be relieved of his coaching duties. I want you all to know this was not an easy decision. It was a very difficult decision. Marc is a good man. He's won a lot more games than he's lost in his football career. But it was a decision that I felt we had to make as an organization. Over the last few weeks, as we've dug into the progress of this team, became clear to me that there was some misalignment on where we wanted to be as an organization. And, as this decision came about, I thought it was very, very important that we had some semblance of continuity and consistency, and I have great faith in this man right here, in Jim Popp, to lead us forward. And I've tasked Jim with going out and hiring the head football coach we can get. And again, I want everyone to know, this is only the second time in my 25 years in this business that I have let a coach go. It was not easy, and especially Marc brought a championship here 2 years ago. So it was not a very flippant decision at all. So it's not lost on me, the magnitude of the decision. But I'm extremely confident in Jim, and I believe that with his track record and his background, the relationship that we've built, I think we're in very good hands going forward.
Yeah, it obviously very difficult, for me. With my relationship with Coach Trestman, this process, we've worked together 7 years. We've done 4 Grey Cups together. We're friends. We've got a great working relationship. But we go through this whole process and being part of MLSC and Bill Manning and what was discussed and moving forward. It came down to a decision that. We needed a change, and that's where we went with it. But I will always be great friends with Coach Trestman. He's a tremendous person. He's a great coach. He's a great inspiration to people to help better them. And and if he wants to continue coaching, I'm sure he's going to have opportunities and somewhere else. So I do nothing but thank him from the bottom of my heart. This has been a very difficult season for us. There's been a lot of things that didn't go right, and we all got to be better for it. And you learn a lot from losing, and much more than you do from winning. And we'll be a better organization moving forward for it.
Okay, any questions? Yes.
Just to be clear, Bill, this was your decision?
So this was a collective decision. I came to Jim last week and talked to him about our situation, and I asked him if he could fix it and what we needed to do, and I think it was, at the end of the day, I own it. I obviously report into our board of directors and so on. But it was a collective decision in that we felt we needed to make a change. And I guess the decision I had to make was this going to be an entire regime change, or was I going to stay with what we had? And I decided I was going to, kind of put my faith in Jim to go right our coaching situation to put this team on track to win games. And Jim knows our expectations is we want to be a playoff team, and that's something that should be without question. And my whole track record as a team president or general manager in my career in another sport, albeit, has been of consistency and continuity. I believe you build a championship team by having consistency in your roster and in your front office and your coaching staff. So again, this was not a light decision. This was a very heavy decision. But I do want to make it clear that I think we have a really good football guy in Jim Popp, who is going to lead this effort to hire a new coach and go forward. But this was not a Bill Manning decision. It was collective with the feedback that I was getting, and I just felt there was a misalignment on some things within the team that I wanted to make sure I gave Jim my support to go out and fix it.
Can you explain what you mean by misalignment?
You know, there was a couple of things that came to light, and I'll ask Jim to elaborate on a bit, but you know, I think the quarterback situation was, you know, clearly there was some maybe difference in opinions on who should be playing. You know, the acquisition of Duron Carter, where there was, you know, again, a little bit of difference. And from my seat, you know, I've said this, I'm not involved in the X's and O's, and I'm not making those decisions. But as the supervisor of the team, I saw a little misalignment. And when you're ending the season like we did, which is unacceptable, we don't want to, MLSE in any of our sports doesn't want to be a 4-14 team. I felt a change had to be made, and I needed to make a decision on who I wanted moving this football operation going forward, and I decided that Jim was the right guy to do that. And so I guess those are two examples of what I saw from my perspective, and Jim knows, we've talked about this, that I just saw that there was some misalignment there, and I am a firm believer that you need your front office in sync with your coaches. The best teams in sports have a front office that is in sync with their coaches.
Does that misalignment also extend to perhaps marketing and branding the team? There was an obvious, like, Coach Trestman was very vocal in team first,
Yep.
Family first,
Social media last.
social media. Like, it just, but it's, and this is certainly not a knock on
Yeah.
Coach Trestman, but
Yeah.
there just seemed to be the way that we all know MLSE likes to market their team just
Yeah.
didn't seem to be in line with how his philosophy of what a team should be.
Yeah, I would say probably not at all coming into this decision. The marketing and the social media and Mark's philosophies on that literally had nothing to do with this decision. This was, from my perspective, having been around sports long enough, you know, I was very fortunate to work for the Philadelphia Eagles for 4 years, where I really got to see a first-class coaching staff. And the late Tom Heckert, who was a very good friend of mine, you know, I spoke to him when I got this job and about running a football operation. I know what a winning culture and a winning team looks like. And at the end of the day, it comes down to the players and the coaching staff, and not as much the marketing and the social media and so on. So I would say that didn't come into this.
Bill, and with respect to the things you've talked about, the CFL is bringing in a cap for coaches and football administration this year, which I don't think everyone is clear about how that's going to be applied, at least those of us in the media.
Yeah.
Was that part of this at all, that something had to be moved because of the league introducing this cap?
You know, I would say no. And how I preface that, if we were 14-4, we wouldn't be having this conversation. If we were 10-8, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. I just felt the way the season ended, too, you didn't see. There was no one rooting for this team to succeed more than me. And game after game, especially towards the end of the season, I just felt the team was not playing for Mark. And it had nothing to do with a cap or any of that. It was, you know, I think everyone knows our organization will do what it needs to do financially to have the best people in place. The team lost its way. And you know, Jim knows I challenged Jim, and I said, can you fix this? And he told me he could. And I'm going to rely on him to do that. But it had nothing to do with meeting some kind of, you know, cap or things like that. This was about winning football games.
Jim, there are a number of, certainly not, some coaches are going to be involved in the playoffs. There are a number of candidates. Are you going to be looking in the CFL when you have the opportunity to? You're going to be looking outside the league. We know obviously your track record of looking outside the league and bringing guys in, obviously with Mark, but what will be your process going forward?
Well, other than Mark, well, I guess there was one other time in Montreal, but most of the time it's always been internal into the league. It depends, you know, who the candidates are at the time when you're looking for a coach, you know, what's available. to your organization. I think there's some strong candidates in our league right now that that are with other teams in turn. But we'll look at all aspects. We'll look at what's best. I mean, I think it's our league's so unique. You got to look at the situation. It's just like when Marc was hired in Montreal. I really felt strongly about needing somebody that could step in and what I thought Anthony Calvillo needed. The year before, I had hired Scott Milanovic, and then when Marc came along, that was the only coach Marc retained, and I thought it was just needed at the time to get the most out of Anthony, and then let alone me knowing Marc to the degree, and even having him as a guest coach the year before. I knew what kind of speaker he was, and thought it would be a great opportunity to give someone a chance at a head coach. But we also had a team in place that, as you can see to this day, was an extraordinary team that was already in place, and it was a much easier situation for someone coming in from the outside. And he did a fantastic job managing and coaching that team. And so every situation's different. Right now, not knowing what Ricky Ray's doing, but right now we have young quarterbacks, and so we don't have a situation like that. So the likelihood, not a guarantee, that coach would come out of our league currently that we'd be looking at, and it doesn't mean it's necessarily on the offensive side of the ball. It could be on the defensive side of the ball, but there's a lot of work we have to do. We're not where we want to be. I mean, we all have a responsibility for having a 4-14 team. I'm part of that responsibility. We won a Grey Cup last year. We got hot down the stretch. We played fantastic football. We had a lot of injuries early. And then this year, a lot of those guys returned. Guys we were very confident in. We had depth going into training camp, and lost a lot of people as we went along the way, starting with our Hall of Fame quarterback. And we're thrusted into playing, younger guys. And equally, both guys probably, when at the end of the day, probably had equal stats, equal everything, that played most of the time between James and McLeod. And, that can be a debate who should have played more or not played more. But, I also put a lot of faith and I trust in Coach Trestman, and I always will, because that's some of his expertise. Okay. And but we didn't have, for a lot of reasons, a great season.
There's going to be a lot of free agent quarterbacks in this class. Are you sitting here right now telling us that you may not look in that market, that James Franklin's going to be the guy next year, or will that be up to the head coach?
It will start with me, okay, because I'm the one that runs the football operation. So we will look at all options, whatever that is. That's not to get into who's going to be a free agent or who potentially is going to be a free agent. I think in our market we have to look at all those options, okay, and figure out what's what. We got to understand who our head coach is going to be, what they bring to the table, and if it's best to add somebody else into that competition. What I will say about our two quarterbacks that played during the season, they have shown signs of having a great opportunity to be very good in this league. I mean, they played at times very well. We were inconsistent most of the season, and not in all areas. We were too inconsistent all season, and but those two gentlemen had great coaching, and we just didn't get consistency out of the spot. But they surely. One doesn't have a lot of experience. I mean, he's been in, it's his fourth year, and he's spot played, and he's played at times well in James. And then McLeod, he spends hours upon hours watching film, and he's been with like 10 different pro teams. He understands it and knows what it takes. And but at the end of the day, we basically got about the same play out of them, and as Coach Trestman alluded to, we got to get them to the next level. And were we able to do that this season? Maybe not. But a lot of the guys, when you look around the league that are star players at that position, spent a good 5 years, a lot of them backing up. And that's typically how our league is. It's rare you have the Ricky Rays, Anthony Calvillos, and Bo Levi Mitchells that walk right into the league and play pretty quick and play at a high level. Most of the guys that are starting and playing well or in playoff teams right now spend a lot of years learning. And that's the tricky thing of our league. That's why it's not easy to find a quarterback that instantly puts up those all-star numbers and maybe people look upon as being your franchise quarterback. So we go through that process. It's always been a thorough process we go through every year, and when you have one of those guys, it's much easier to win. And then if you have a very strong defense with one of those guys, you're going to win a lot of football games.
How much, I'm following up on that, how much of the reason that we're all sitting here today following this decision do you think is looped to the fact that Ricky Ray went off the field in the home opener on a stretcher?
I don't think we'll ever know that, but I think when you look at the history of Ricky Ray and or our history from the year before with a lot of the exact same offensive players, the odds are it would have been better. And would that have accounted for how many more wins? We don't know. People can debate how good a team we had, especially as we got injuries, they mounted. But I truly believe we were good enough to be a playoff team, even if we were a 500 team. And we had plenty of chances to win games to be a 500 team. And it just didn't happen this year, And again, there's different reasons, but that's not just a quarterback position. I mean, it's it's in all three phases that we needed to be better, and we all have a responsibility to that. Yep.
So Jim, then if Marc's history with quarterbacks and what he's been able to do, with them, why not? If it's just 1 year that you add the two guys after Ricky Ray went down, and it takes a while to develop these guys. What did you not see then that wouldn't give you confidence that Marc could develop these people going forward and you have to start fresh now?
Well, I don't, it's not one specific thing and it's not about one specific quarterback position. So, again, this was an organizational decision. It was all discussed, talked about, and at the end of the day, there was a decision made. And again, will always be judged, right? On that decision. Was it the right move? Was it not the right move? Again, I think things just coupled together, and then we didn't finish very strong. Of probably why the final decision was made the way it came out. But at the end of it, we're expected to win, and we won a Grey Cup a year ago, and again, it's a very hard thing for me because again, Marc and I have collaborated for seven years, 5 years and then 2 more years, and in that we've gone to 4 Grey Cups, and this is the first time collaborating together we've ever, to have a losing record. But again, that's not just a one-person decision. That was an organizational decision that of what and looking forward to the future and what we're striving to do, and I'm part of that. And so the decision was made.
Well, you know him better than anyone. If you had the full power to have made this decision, would it have been made?
Well, I have a obligation to an organization to do what's right for the organization as we talk as a group of what we're looking for and what we're doing, and that's what the decision was. It's not a hypothetical.
What was Marc's reaction to the news?
Well, Bill talked to him. I talked to him, and I'll let Bill.
He was respectful and gracious as he always is, and it was. And I told him this was just a decision that was not taken lightly, and I hope that. I told him, I said, I hope that he can be understanding, and he said, I will respect you, and please respect me, and it was very simple. These conversations, aren't warm and cuddly, right? And so it was just to the point, and I just think he's a good man, and he was respectful and he's gracious, and I'm sure in his comments he will be. I expect nothing else, and I imagine Marc Trestman is going to be a head coach someplace else, and he's going to, and in the right situation, he's going to do well. It just, for, as Jim said, a variety of reasons, wasn't the case this season.
The perceived disconnect between you and Coach Trestman. When the season began, a lot of people were concerned, or at least surprised, by the fact that Trestman didn't give Franklin the support of being the backup quarterback to Ricky Ray. How did you feel about that at the time?
He did. He chose James Franklin. That's who started once Ricky Ray went down. So that was chosen. That was decided.
But that's not what he said. He clearly told us in the media there is no second.
Well, you're talking about going into training camp?
With Bethel Thompson.
In training camp, obviously everybody's in competition. It was made clear who the number one guy is, but when you bring somebody else in new, Mark wanted to make sure that was a competition. He has the right to do that as a head coach. It wasn't a matter of going, Jim Popp says he's the number two. We discussed signing him and trying to get the best quarterback we could, and the hottest free agent that was going to be on the market. If he hit the free agent, we took a real risk. We traded to get James, and we brought him in. So Coach is all on board with that. So when you go into it, this is just how Coach is. I mean, Coach, whether you agree with it or, I've been a part of it for 7 years, and I have no problem with it. He made it a competition, and we go to camp every year, whether you're a star or not. It's competition. Now, when you have a Hall of Fame quarterback who just led you to the Grey Cup, he's the starter. And then behind that, we're going to find out. Bethel had already put in, Cloud, had already put in a year of work, and he works hard. Tremendous work ethic. And so who does maybe Coach trust more from the start? Well, of course it's McLeod, because he already knows what he's had. McLeod went from the fourth-string quarterback, or maybe five at one time a year ago, to the number two guy before the season ended. And to bring somebody else in new, it's kind of a process. Coaches always had that, a process that you're going to have to earn your right, when you come in, instead of just jumping ahead of somebody. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so, after 4 games, he decided he wanted to give, McLeod a chance. And then he stuck with that until we were eliminated out of the playoffs, and then went back to James. And, I can't, we discussed all these things. I wanted to make sure that in the back end, I wanted to see what James can do. We got to know as an organization what James can do. We got a lot of money invested in James. When we went out and signed James, we had no idea if Ricky Ray was playing football. We might have been with these two guys the entire season without Ricky Ray starting there and getting hurt. So, I know Coach the entire time made it. I haven't decided. But obviously there was a decision made, and he made it with his coaching staff that he was going to start James, or he was the guy that went in for Ricky when he got hurt, and he was the guy that started the next, 4 games. So that was his decision, but it was also his decision when he made a decision that he wanted to give McLeod a shot at it. And I understand. I mean, we weren't winning. And we won the next 2 with McLeod, right?
2 more questions, please, and then Jim will be available for scrum.
Jim, do you have a timeline for hiring a coach?
I think our timeline is pretty similar. It's going to be strung out, because it depends who we're interested in and if they're still participating with other teams. I'll be fair to other teams. I mean, it's not. I'm talking in general here because it doesn't mean. But there's probably people that are in the playoffs right now that we would have an interest in talking to, and it's not to speculate anybody or I want those teams to fully concentrate and and whoever they are, hope they win the Grey Cup, and we're still the champion and still someone's crown, right? But to be fair to them, we're not going to talk about names, and so the process could be strung out over the next month, and unless we find the guy that we're the person that we're really interested in.
How about the coaching staff? Are you going to make any decisions, or will the head coach fit into the staff that you create, or or you leave it all up to him?
Well, part of the problem we have is this new cap, because the new cap doesn't allow you to just get rid of people that are under contract, right? And then if they do, then those people are all, I mean, their salaries are spread over a 5-year span, so that really hasn't all been explained yet. But we do have several coaches that are under contract, so whatever new coach we have, more than likely will retain some of the coaches. That probably will happen. Okay, now if coaches that have contracts, not all of them have contracts, if they do not want to be here, then the odds are we're not going to force them to stay, and then we'll probably have a way of releasing them out of their contracts and move on. But we have several coaches under contract, and I would expect if they want to be here, either all of them or some of them will be here with whatever new coach we do.